Hi there everyone, it's Rosie. I'm here today to give you the first lesson of the history of the English language. We're going to have an introductory lesson and a general overview of the history of language. You can see that the lesson is divided into 4 parts. The first part is going to be a general introduction to the history of language. What do we mean by the history of language? And then we're going to talk about the history of spoken language, or the history of Indo-European languages, and we're also going to talk about the history of written language, so where our alphabet comes from exactly. Overall, the main idea of today's lesson is to give you some background on European linguistic history, and then later on we're going to narrow our focus onto just the history of the English language. Okay, so the first question I said we're going to discuss, it is, what do we mean by language change? And so to demonstrate that, I actually have 2 examples of text on the screen. The first one, it is the Russian language from 1,000 years ago, and the second one is the English language from 1,000 years ago. So let's compare the 2 pieces of language. Let's have a look at the Russian first. Exactly how much of this Russian can you, as a native Russian speaker, I hope, how much of this can you understand? There are a number of words which I can read, for example, jest and poszła and zemlya and Kiev. So this Russian language, more or less, you as a modern Russian speaker, you can understand it and even read it. Whereas on the other hand, we can look at an example of English from 1,000 years ago. Any words here that you can understand? Probably not, right? Even if I read it for you, What wegarde na intendaton de od königa frunse frunon huda ethelinga ele fremedon of chilchefing shed na threto menego medom milzetla of the York so de ola shiven erestvar, and so on. How many words can you understand? None, more or less. So what's happened to the English language? Has English just, do we just speak a totally different language today? Actually, no. There are a few words that you would be able to read if you were a native speaker. For example, shield is shield, koning is king. Actually, the English we speak today does come from this Old English, as we call it on the screen. So this, it's evidence of language change. If we travel back in time 1,000 years, you would not be able to understand Old English. If we traveled back 1,000 years, you might be able to understand Old Slavic. Well, in any case, in the history of the English language, I want us to study how do we get from Old English to contemporary English, and why has English changed so much when other languages have changed so little. An example of a language that has almost not changed at all in the last 1,000 years is Icelandic. So there was a linguist, I've forgotten his name, I'll put it on the bottom of the screen. He decided that he was going to take the core 1,000 words from a language and then compare 1,000 years before and see how many of these core 1,000 words had changed. And not surprisingly, English is one of the ones that has changed the most in the last 1,000 years, by something like 20%, whereas something like Icelandic has changed so little, by something like just 5%. And so what has caused these changes, that's another thing that we can study in the history of the English language, some political, historical, cultural differences between different countries. So why are we studying the history of the English language? Well, by looking at the development of language, we can actually start to understand some of the weird things about the English language. For example, we have 2 different categories of verbs in English. As we know, we have regular verb, play, played, work, worked. And then we also have irregular verbs, run, ran, begin, began. Why is English doing this? Well, actually, the reason you can find in the history of language. Why do we say one man 2 men? 1 sheep, 2 sheep? Once again, the answer can be found by studying historical linguistics. If you're not particularly interested in linguistics, then studying the history of England can also help you to understand the culture of English people. If you'd like to study a language, I imagine that what's interesting for you about the language is not only communicating for business reasons, but also because you find the culture of the language interesting, I hope. So this course is not only for the linguists among you, it's also for you fans of culture who would like to learn a bit more about British history and American history and so on. If those 2 things are not for you, we're also going to study some literature in this course. We're going to study Beowulf, we're going to study Chaucer, and we're also going to study Shakespeare. These are 3 very influential writers and pieces of writing which have influenced the English language quite a lot. So we're going to look at those as well. So literature fans, you can enjoy those. Okay, so let's begin right at the very beginning. Let's begin with the first person to ever speak a language. Have a look at my map. Where do you think most linguistic theorists think that the first language was spoken? If you are looking with me at probably the blue dot, then you're probably right. A lot of people think that humans originated in Africa, and so the first humans probably also spoke a language, so we probably think that probably this is where the first languages were ever spoken. But it's not just guessing like that. We actually have some evidence for it as well. And for the evidence, I'm going to play you a little clip of a video of someone speaking a language in Africa. The language is called Xhosa from South Africa. You can listen to it.
It will be the clicking sentences, starting with the C1. So the meanings, close the door tightly so that no air could penetrate. The X1, the old man had an appointment with his friend. His friend did not turn up. He panicked, became very angry, and moved to another place. The Q1, a squirrel went up the top of the hill, decided to roll back to the...
Okay, so this language has got some sounds which your language does not have. The sounds are the clicking sounds. In fact, in Xhosa there are 3 different clicking sounds. I'm not going to make them, I don't think I can do them. But languages in Africa have got sounds that languages anywhere else in the world have not got. And actually, if you draw a graph, you can see the graph on the screen. You can see that the horizontal axis, this is distance from Africa. So on the left side, you have like in Africa. And as you go further away, this is going out of Africa. And on the vertical axis, going up and down, you can see it's the number of different sounds a language has got. So if it's up here, it has got more different sounds. And if it's down here, it's got fewer different sounds. The languages that have got the most sounds, they are the ones in Africa. For example, Xhosa, this language has got and clicking sounds and ha aspirated sounds, and it's got so many different consonants, more than you have got. Then let's travel out away from Africa. Let's go, for example, to Arabic. Which language has got more sounds? Arabic or Russian, let's say. Right, Arabic has actually got more sounds. Arabic has got, for example, 2 different versions of S. It's got sin and sad, a s, and it's also got a d and a d, and it's got a h and a h. And so Arabic has got more sounds than Russian. Even, we can keep going up, we can compare Kazakh and Russian. Which language has got more sounds? Kazakh and Russian, right? Kazakh, ka, right? So Kazakh has got more language than Russian as you go away from Africa. So the number of sounds in your language goes down. And so this is why some people say that it must be that languages came from Africa. Because of this evidence, languages start lots of complicated, lots and lots of different sounds, and as they go away, the number of sounds goes down. Alright, my next question for you, it is, how many languages are spoken in total in the world, do you think? If you think 400, you are wrong. If you think 90,000, you are just overestimating a bit. The answer is there are 7,000 different languages in the world. But if you have learned any languages, then you might have noticed that some languages are more similar than others. This is because in our story of the languages traveling from Africa and spreading out across the world, we're talking about groups of people which split into 2 groups, into 4 groups, into 8 groups, into 16 groups. What do I mean? Well, let's say we have 10 people living in Africa. They have too many people, not enough space, so they divide into 2 groups of 5, and they start new families, they start traveling to new places, and they slowly, over time, their language will change, and after about 1,000 years, people say 1,000 years, the languages that these 2 groups speak are now different languages, and they can't understand each other because their vocabulary has changed too much, their pronunciation has changed too much, and so they can't understand each other. So 2 different language groups. Now, next, this language group over here, these guys are going to split again into 2 different groups. And these guys are going to travel away from each other, they're going to live separately for 1,000 years, and then they can't understand each other again. And now we have 4 different language groups. And then 8, and then 16, and then so on until we get to 7,000. So when we study languages, we can think about languages which are very close to each other in the family. For example, maybe we can say English and German. They are like 2 sisters. And then we can think about languages which are, okay, quite close in the family, but maybe just cousins. For example, English and Russian are cousins. And then we need to think about languages which are not really cousins, maybe they are 3rd and 4th and 5th cousins. This is, for example, English and Turkish. And so the further away you are from another language, the more different your languages are in vocabulary, in pronunciation, and in grammar as well. So this means that you can understand languages which are the sister, the cousin of your language, because some words and some pronunciations, they will be kind of the same. And so to demonstrate this, I want to show you a language which probably none of you speak. That's Tajik language. On the screen here, you can see Tajik numbers from 1 to 10, but I've mixed them up. Your job is to try and put them in order from 1 to 10 in English. I'll give you some help. How to say 1 in Tajik is ik. Okay, so you can do it by yourself. Alright, so let me count to 10 for you very badly in Tajik. Here's the answers. Ek, du, se, chor, panch, shash, haft, and then hasht, and then nuch, and then dach. So let's think about shash, haft, nuch, dach, 7, 8, 9, 10, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10, 8, 9, 10. All of these languages are really quite similar. That's because they're all together in one family. The name of this family is the Indo-European language family. Why is it called Indo-European? Because it includes languages from India, right? And it also includes language from Europe, right? And so, why do you know how to count to 10 in Tajik, more or less, it's because you speak an Indo-European language. Russian and English are both Indo-European languages. So among the first people to recognize this are the two brothers that you can see on the screen. These guys are called the Brothers Grimm. The Brothers Grimm are not actually famous for linguistics. The Brothers Grimm are famous for their fairy stories. Now, the Brothers Grimm traveled around Europe collecting fairy stories and comparing these fairy stories to see which things were similar and which things were different. For example, you may know the story of Cinderella. Cinderella, poor girl, her mother is dead, her father has married another woman, and so Cinderella must stay in the kitchen and clean all the time, even though one day she should be the queen. Very sad. And then one day she goes to a dance, and thanks to a magic fairy, she's got a magic dress, she meets the prince falls in love with her, and then she has to run away because it's 12 o'clock and her dress is going to change back, so she has to run back home, and the prince finds her shoe and he goes to find her. Based on the shoe, he can try to match her together with the girl that he met the other day. Right. And then what happens to the ugly sisters? In some versions, he sends them away. In other versions, he makes shoes of iron, and then he heats them up in the fire, and then he makes the ugly sisters put on the hot iron shoes and dance until they die. Okay, so these different versions of the story, the Brothers Grimm found very interesting, and they collected these ideas and they made comparisons between different regions and different versions of the story. But at the same time, they were also looking at different versions of languages. They noticed, for example, isn't it interesting that we say 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, in all these different languages? Isn't it interesting that it's so similar? And so the Brothers Grimm, they create a theory which is all about how languages in the Indo-European family change sounds, change some words, change some pronunciation. They made some theories about which ones were close brothers and sisters and which ones were just cousins. Right, so on the map you can see the Indo-European languages. You can see that it covers quite a lot of consonants. It's about 50% of the world's population speak an Indo-European language, although we have to say that quite a lot of the purple on that screen is countries that started speaking an Indo-European language less than 1,000 years ago, mainly people speaking English. So the first exercise I wanted us to do today actually was to have a look at lots of different examples of languages which fall within the Indo-European language family. And I wanted us to try and divide them and see which ones we thought were maybe close cousins and brothers and sisters, and which ones are maybe very far away family, or maybe they are not really part of the family at all. And so you can see here, this is the practice card. I have some English words on the card, and I'd like you to translate them for me into Russian in preparation. You can fill in that little table on your booklet. Okay, I hope that went well. I have got a translated version for you. I sent it to the attachment. So these words, now you understand them, we're going to look at them in other Indo-European languages. Right, starting with this card. This language, it's part of a family called the Romance family of Indo-European languages. Let me count to 10 and you can guess the language. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Pied, père, frère, sangue, tête. It's French. That's right, so French is part of the Romance family. Right, so let's look at another family in the Indo-European language family. Aha, Balto-Slavic. I cannot pronounce this language. Anyway, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's Polish. It's Polish. Right, so Polish is a Balto-Slavic language because It's the languages from the Baltic Sea and the Slavic languages as well, combined into one family. Some people say Baltic is one family, Slavic is the other family, but for us, we're going to say Balto-Slavic in just one. Okay, next language. It's the Celtic family of languages. Un, dau, tri, pedwar, pump, chwech, saith, wyth, naw, deg. What's this language? It's my native language. It's Welsh. Right, so Welsh is in the Celtic language family, one of the small ones. Okay, next one. This is the Indo-Iranian language family. It goes ek, do, tin, char, panch, cha, sat, ath, now, das. Right, it's Hindi. Sorry, bad pronunciation, Hindi. Right, and then last family, Germanic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's German. Right, so German language is in the Germanic family of languages. Surprised. Okay, there is one more, but actually this is not a language family. It's kind of just one language by itself for our study. So this language goes ena, dio, trio, tessera, pende, exi, epta, octo, enea, dec. This is Greek language. So Greek language is an Indo-European language, but it has no brothers or sisters as far as we're concerned. Right, so we've looked at 5 different ones. Your job is to tell me which one does English belong to. English is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 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 Or English is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. So English must be a Germanic language because have a listen to those sounds. 4 and 5. 4, 5. English and German both have a f sound in the beginning of 4 and 5. However, if we look at Russian, it's 4, 5, and in Welsh, it's pedwar, pump. So we can look at the sounds of German and English, and we can say these are very close languages. In fact, they are brother and sister, German and English in the Germanic language. Okay, so next, I have a whole collection of languages for you, and you have to similarly have a look at the sounds, have a look at the pronunciation, and see if you can divide them into the right families. Oh, I forgot, I had to give you a clue. The clue is that there are no cards which belong to the Russian language. There are 5 for Germanic, 2 for Balto-Slavic, 4 for Romance, 2 for Indo-Iranian, and 1 for Celtic. Obviously, I haven't included all of the languages which are in the Indo-European family, but I just chose some small examples. I should also tell you that there are 2 imposters in the pack of cards. So there are 2 languages which are so different from all the others, and that's because they are not Indo-European. So maybe 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 years ago, maybe they were connected, but these days they are totally, completely different. So they're not Indo-European, they're from a different family. So you can have a look. I'll see you later. Right, so the answers are, in the Greek or Hellenic language family, we have the Greek language. In the Germanic language family, we have German, English, Danish, Dutch, Swedish, and Icelandic. Right. In the Balto-Slavic language families, we have Polish, Bulgarian, and Latvian. Some unusual ones. For the Romance languages, we have French, Spanish, Italian, Romanian, and Latin. And then in Indo-Iranian, we have got Hindi, Farsi, and Tajik. And for Celtic, we have got Welsh and Irish. And the imposters, those 2 are Finnish and Arabic. I think Arabic is quite obvious, but Finnish may be a surprise for you. Finnish, although it's spoken inside Europe, it's not an Indo-European language. It actually has a different origin. Finnish language is part of the Uralic language families. So if you draw a line from the Urals down to Finland, this area speaks Uralic language over there. There's also Hungarian. Hungarian is also not an Indo-European language, and that's why it's so difficult for foreigners to learn if they would like to live in Hungary. Right, so if we have a look at this map, we can see exactly where the Indo-European families are located. So for example, the red color over here, that's Germanic languages. The yellow color down there, those are all Romance languages. Why are they called Romance? Because they're so romantic? No, because they come from the Roman people. The Roman Empire, they spoke Latin. And the Roman Empire covered all of these yellow countries down here. And after the end of the Roman Empire, all these different countries, their version of the Latin language changed over time, and now a person who speaks French can't understand someone who speaks Spanish after just 1,000 or maybe 1,500 years of change. The question is then, where does the Indo-European family come from? We said that in general languages must have come from Africa, but what about the Indo-European language? Where was it first spoken? Well, making estimates is quite difficult because unfortunately the language Proto-Indo-European, it's the language spoken by the first Indo-Europeans maybe 6,000 years ago, this language was never written down. And the material culture we have to guess about these people, that means, for example, their bones, their old houses, their writing, their pots, evidence of their cookery, most of this just doesn't really exist. When you compare it to, for example, the Egyptians, where we have pyramids, we have scrolls of writing, we have their writing on the walls, we have their letters that they sent from one king to another king. In terms of Indo-European language, we just don't have that because the Indo-Europeans didn't write, or probably they didn't write. And a lot of them lived a nomadic lifestyle, or they lived in wooden houses. No, the wooden houses are just gone. Right. So how can we make a guess about where the Indo-Europeans actually came from? Well, we're going to have to look at cognates. What is a cognate? A cognate is a word which, within the family of Indo-European languages, is the same or of the same origin. For example, the word tu and dva and duo, all of these words must have come from the same word sometime back in history, back when all of these languages were the same language. So the word cognate comes from Latin. It means co and then natos, which means born together. These words were born together something like 6,000 years ago. And the cognates can help us to give a few guesses about where the Indo-Europeans lived. For example, how do you say the word snow in Russian? Снег, snow, schnee, neige. In all the Indo-European languages, we have the same word. And so this must mean back in the day when we were all speaking the same language, so we must have seen some snow and given it a name. And so when the languages changed over time and evolved, the word snow kind of stayed the same, although different pronunciations. And so the Indo-Europeans must have been somewhere where there was snow. So the Indo-Europeans, did they live in a desert? No, right? Obviously, because there is no snow in the desert, I think. Right. So apart from snow, I can give you a few more cognates. You can have a look at the different cards that I gave to you. And then from these cards, we can make some guesses about the Proto-Indo-Europeans. For example, I already have on the screen an example about snow. Did they live in a desert? No, because they all have cognates of the same word, snow, schnee, and they have this cognate of the same word, fish, pesce. So for this reason, the Proto-Indo-Europeans must have all had fish and all had snow. What about whether they lived by the sea? In Russian, moria. In Latin, mare. In German, see. Oh no, the Proto-Indo-Europeans didn't live by the sea because the Indo-European languages all have different words for sea. Okay, so this must mean that sometime in Indo-European history, there were two groups. And this group, they traveled down here and they saw the sea. And they said, what should we call it? Let's call it mare. And then this group over here, they saw this big water and they said, let's call it the sea. And so it must have been after the Indo-Europeans divided into two different groups that they met with the sea. You see? Okay, next one. Were they hunters only or were they farmers? Well, if you look at the word for grain and corn, they must have been farmers because they all have the same word. Okay, what about, did they have domestic horses? Equus and horse. They are not very good cognates, but they are cognates. They do have the same origin, in fact. So, Proto-Indo-Europeans, they did have horses. Last one, did they have iron? Железо in Russian? No. We don't think that the Indo-Europeans had iron because they don't have the same name for it, right? Of course, there could have been some accident or maybe some slang or something that changed that made the languages have different words. But from our best guess, we can guess that the Indo-Europeans had horses, they had farming, they had iron, they lived somewhere near snow, and they also lived somewhere near oak trees. So overall, our best guess was that they must have been somewhere near the Black Sea, where there is snow, fish, the right kind of oaks, and it's in the right region to be the origin of the Indo-Europeans in terms of archaeology as well as linguistically. So cognates are a bit confusing because it's hard to see how the word pesce and fish are the same word. But in fact, the changes between one language and the other language are regular, they are predictable from one language to another. So for example, in English we have foot, fish, father and five. And then in Romance languages, so the languages that come from Latin, we have piede, pesce, padre, cinque. So in Romance languages it seems to be with a p, and in Germanic languages it seems to be a f. Foot, piede, father, padre, fish, pesce. And so this, it's something called Grimm's Law. Why? Because it was discovered by the Grimm brothers. They said, oh, it must have been that at some time they were both the same word, and then the people who went to become the Germanic language family, these guys all started to say it with a f sound, and everyone over here, they carried on saying it with a p sound. There are some more examples of Grimm's Law that I would like you to work out by yourself. So you need those language cards again, the ones that we were using earlier in the lesson. And these language cards, you have to look up some different words and fill in the table to show how language changed. For example, we have the th sound, theta. In English, three and tooth. Can you find how to pronounce that in a Romance language? Anyone is fine? Let's go for Italian. I've got Italian here. Tre and dente. So three is tre and tooth is dente. So it must be in Germanic languages we pronounce things like th, whereas in a Romance language we pronounce something like t. Right, so you can carry on doing this exercise. I'll show you the answers on the screen. Essentially, we can see that the changes between Germanic language and Romance language, they are predictable. And so if you found a word in a Romance language and you changed the t to a th, you could say that's an example of Grimm's Law. For example, another one, let's say two and tooth. In Italian are due and dente, so t is d, and this is another example of Grimm's Law. Grimm brothers are not the only ones who made some thoughts about the changes between languages. There's also Cowgill and a whole collection of Wikipedia articles that you can read about it that even talk about small, minute differences between languages. For example, what about a W that comes before a stressed syllable? What about a W that comes after a vowel? What about a T, except that it is a T that comes after a F or something? So, unfortunately, we are not able to take an English word and automatically just guess what it's going to be in French, for example. But we can make a pretty good comparison between languages and have a look at what the cognates must be in between the different languages. Right, so what is interesting about being able to connect cognates between different languages is that you can use them to guess what the original word was in Proto-Indo-European. That's the language of the original Indo-Europeans. For people like the Grimm brothers, this was a really fascinating idea. Why was it fascinating? Well, if you can take examples of languages spoken today and use it to reconstruct Proto-Indo-European, then why can't you take some of the other proto-languages from 600 BC and use that to construct another proto-language, the language that came before those? Can we use that to construct the language that came before that? Can we use that to construct the original language spoken to the original people by God? Well, they thought it would be quite good to be able to speak God's language, and so this reconstruction effort was a really serious effort in the 16th, 17th century until basically linguists got tired of it for quite a long time. But let's talk about some linguistic reconstruction. How can we do it? Well, you can see in this illustration, which I think is quite good, around the outside of this circle, you can see how to say the word for in lots of different languages. So for example, we've got fear, for, that's all the Germanic words. So if you take the common sounds of these words, we can make a pretty good guess of what the proto word must have been, which is verdwar. Right? And then we can go to, let's say, Latin. We know how the Latins said the word for because actually they wrote their language down. So we say in Latin, quatuor. And then let's go to the Slavic language. We have chetri, cheteri, chpori, chetere. Okay, so probably in Proto-Slavic it was chetere. And then you take all of these reconstructed versions of for from 2,000 years ago. And then you use them to guess what the one was before that even. And so you take the k or qu from the Latin and Balto-Slavic languages, quatuor. Okay, so it must start with a qu sound. And in the middle, we have or and war. Okay, so it must be quatuorus. The reason why it's written on the screen here with a little star, that's because it really is a guess. There is no written evidence that anyone said this word ever in life, but it's just our guess about how this word was said in the past. It's not totally unscientific. In fact, it is quite a scientific guess, but we don't have any evidence, and we are never going to get evidence to prove it unless somehow we can travel back in time and talk to these Proto-Indo-Europeans, because, as we said before, they never wrote it down. What a pity. One more thing before we finish. I just wanted to mention that some of the cognates that you will find, they are not direct. For example, pesca, fish, or fear and for. Some cognates are a little bit more confusing. You can see an example on the screen over here. The word cow, the word beef, and the word butter. These words, okay, they all come from one Proto-Indo-European word, which was like goose. So we have cow comes from coo, comes from coos, comes from goose. And then we have beef, boeuf, bos, gos, goes. And then we have butter, butter, buttero, butterum, butteron, boos, goose, goes again. So when we go back up in time, all this came from one word. And it's logical, right? It's the cow, it's the beef, it's the butter. It's basically just the same thing, isn't it? Really all the same stuff. Sort of. Okay, so in conclusion, spoken language originates somewhere in Africa. After that, groups of people divide into different groups. All these people speak the same language in the beginning, but as they divide, the different groups, their language starts to change in pronunciation, in vocabulary, and eventually, after about 1,000 years, each language can no longer understand its brother and sister. These languages then divide into more languages, and these languages, again, after 1,000 years, can't understand each other at all. And eventually, gradually, over time, the languages that we see all around us today developed. And the family of languages that we are going to focus on in our course of History of the English Language is the Indo-European family of languages. The Indo-European family of languages include, for example, English, German, French, Dutch, Spanish, Russian. All of these are all together in the family. Let's say Hindi as well, just for geography. Right. So all of these languages, some of them are quite close to each other and some of them are quite different from each other. For example, English and German, they are brothers and sisters. They are called the Germanic language family. English and French, they are more like cousins because French are Romance languages and English and German are Germanic, as we said. However, the Germanic and the Romance languages, they had their own grandfather language. The grandfather language, we call it Proto-Indo-European. And so these languages, they have a lot of words that are similar, words that come from the same Proto-Indo-European word. They are called cognates. For example, a cognate is the word foot, and piede and pod, which is the word foot. And so these words, they sound different, but they don't sound different entirely at random. In fact, they sound different according to rules. And an example of these rules is that in a Romance language, the sound is p, whereas in a Germanic language, a sound would be f. For example, pede and foot, and penta and five. And so these are called Grimm's laws. Why? Because the Grimm brothers, they are some of the early linguists who studied the different languages of the European continent. So let's say goodbye now to Indo-European languages for a little bit, and we'll go back in time to the origins of writing. Now, you must not think about writing and spoken language as being part of the same evolutionary tree, because they are not at all. You can take, for example, Kazakh language. Kazakh language has been written with how many alphabets? Like 3, right? The Arabic, and then the Latin, and then Cyrillic, and now Latin again. So when we changed alphabets, did we change the language? No. We didn't change the language, we just changed the way that we wrote it down on paper. And so when we talk about alphabets, we are not talking about the spoken language at all. Let's completely disconnect them, just to start. So, where does our alphabet, my alphabet, English alphabet, Latin alphabet, and your alphabet, Cyrillic, where do they come from? They actually all come from the same origin. We need to go back in time to this map. Where does my alphabet come from? It's not the cyan square, it is the pink square. What country is it? It's Egypt. Our alphabets both come from Egyptian hieroglyphs. Maybe you don't believe me, but I can give you an example. So, Egyptian hieroglyphs, they started off to be a picture means a word. For example, if I draw a picture of a cow, this means cow. But this system has got a problem. For example, I would like to draw a picture of a pigeon. I could draw one for you, but would you look at that picture and say pigeon? Maybe you would say parrot. You would have to be a really good artist to get everyone around the world to understand what you had drawn. And besides, it takes quite a long time to try and draw a pigeon. So I can do a little cheat. I can draw a picture of a pigeon, and then I can write an extra little letter. And this little letter says, this word sounds like Wiggin. So it's a bird, it looks a bit like a pigeon, and it sounds like Wiggin. Okay, so it must be pigeon. And so the Egyptians started to write with not only pictures which had meaning of words, for example, cow is cow, but also if you drew a little one, it would mean it's pronounced like this little word. And it becomes quite efficient to use little pictures to mean sounds instead of just drawing the big picture. And so people start to write with pictures just to represent sounds. For example, the picture of a cow in Egyptian is like achs or ach. And then this becomes the sound ah. And then you simplify it. Ah. And then you simplify it. Ah. And now it still has the same sound, but it looks like ah. Our A. Right? So we go from Egyptian, that's my first example. This is the hieroglyphs from 3,000 years ago. And then second one is Semitic. This was 1,000 years BC. It was found somewhere in a cave, I think. And then after that we have the Phoenician alphabet. The Phoenician Empire was an empire around the Mediterranean. You can see it's kind of sideways A. And then the Greeks took this and turned it like that, and now it's an upright A. And then finally, from the Greeks, the Romans took their alphabet. They called it the Latin alphabet because it was used to write Latin language. And so what about Cyrillic? That's your alphabet. Cyrillic, it doesn't come from the Latin. Actually, go back to the Greeks. Greek alphabet was taken by a man called Saint Cyril, Kirill, we call him, and he took this alphabet and used it to write Russian language with. And so it's called Kirillitsa, Cyrillic, because of this man who made this alphabet, Saint Cyril. So our alphabets have a common origin. How interesting. Now, it's important to say that not all alphabets have this same origin. In fact, alphabets were invented between 3 and, let's say, 6 different times. Depending on different theorists, they have different ideas about who invented the alphabet and did they ever see an alphabet before they started writing it. And some languages don't use an alphabet system at all. They use, for example, pictograms or like the Chinese Hanzi. So on the screen you can see a few examples of alphabets which do not come from the Egyptian hieroglyphs. For example, this first one up here, it's Korean. Korean is a phonetic alphabet, but it's not based on the hieroglyphs. In fact, probably it might have been based on this one down here, which is the Mongolian Fagspa, maybe, or maybe it was just the original thought of this Korean prince whose name I can't remember. Right, like I said, there's the Mongolian alphabet. It's not really commonly in use today. Mongolia uses Cyrillic, but some places are changing back to this Fagspa. Down here you can see Chinese Hanzi. Hanzi also does not have any origin in Egyptian hieroglyphs, although some shapes and forms are similar. We think it must have had a different inventor. Down here, this is an alphabet used in South America by the Olmecs. It's actually where that little symbol on the Mexican flag comes from. So these little pictures represent syllable sounds, and you can see Mexico, Mexico. That's an interesting one for you. Yes, right. So we can go back to our hieroglyphs because that's our focus, because we're doing history of the English language. Egyptian hieroglyphs are actually the origin of not only Latin alphabet and Cyrillic alphabet, but also the Arabic alphabet has the same origin, as well as the Hebrew alphabet. All of that comes from hieroglyphs. So I have a little puzzle for you. I think I sent it to you. You need to try to put the symbols in the right order to show the development of the alphabet from hieroglyphs up to Latin. So you can do that. I'll see you in a minute. Right. So next I have a quick challenge for you to explain what the process looks like of the development of the alphabet. We need to learn a bit of terminology. So here you can see 4 stages of the development of the alphabet. You need to put them in the right order from first until last. The first one I'll do for you as an example. The first step, it's called ideograms. Idea writing. So in an ideogram, the picture shows the idea. For example, a picture of an apple means apple. So the rest, can you try and put them in the right order for me? Thank you. Okay, so the order starts with proto-literacy, telling a story just using pictures. So if you draw a man, and then you draw some legs, and then you draw a picture of a river, it must be the man walks to the river. And then you start to draw some little image to tell you how to pronounce a word. So the little image is called the phonogram, and the big one is called the ideogram. So you have the idea, and then you have the sound, ideogram, phonogram. After that, we just start to write with just the phonograms. The name of this is called demotic, if you're interested. And so this one, we don't need the big pictures, we just use the pronunciation. And then slowly over time, this alphabet changes and simplifies, and some things are added, some things are changed. For example, the Greek alphabet adds the vowel sounds A, E, I, O, U. I have to show you the family tree of alphabets, which, remember, is not connected to the family tree of languages. Down here at the bottom, you can see my name written in Egyptian hieroglyphs. It's not very accurate, I just did it just to show you. And after that, we have the Phoenician alphabet, and then it splits into two. Up this way is the Greek alphabet. You can see it's written from left to right, whereas here, the Nabatean alphabet is written from right to left. Nabatean eventually becomes Hebrew and Arabic, and the Greek eventually becomes Latin and Cyrillic, and also runes. And so all of these alphabets, we can say, have one origin. How do we know all this? Actually, it was a mystery for a really long time. We discovered this first when we found the stone called the Rosetta Stone. This stone, you can see it's a stela, and it has the same text written in 3 different writing systems. At the top, you have Egyptian hieroglyphs. The second one, you have Egyptian demotic. This is where you have the sort of simplified symbols, but we're still at, where are we? We're about 1000 BC there. And then down here we have the Greek. So all of these are saying the same thing, and so we could use the Greek to help us try and understand the hieroglyphs and the demotic. And through this, we started to recognize that we're also showing the passage of time from past to present. Right. So, in conclusion, where does the alphabet that we use to write English today come from? It comes from Egyptian hieroglyphs. Egyptian hieroglyphs, although originally represented a picture, meaning a meaning. For example, picture of an apple equals apple. Eventually, phonograms were introduced, the phonograms were simplified, and then we started to use the phonograms together with vowels, A, E, I, O, U, and this created the first alphabet, which we use to write English today. Okay, so that's all for our first lesson of the history of the English language. We've learned about where the English language comes from in ancient history. We've learned about how the English language developed. We've learned about what languages are similar to English, what languages are cousins to English, and what languages are very distant cousins to English. And finally, we've also talked about where the English writing system comes from, a completely different development which begins in ancient Egypt. So, I hope you enjoyed it, and I wish you a lovely day, and I'll see you again next time.